So there are three processes that make urine. Based on different, they happen in different parts of the nephron. The first part is glomerular filtration. Now, if you remember a little bit from lab this week, is this good light-wise? Not too dark? Oh, I'm trying to get artistic today. Not too bad. Does this look like a nephron? Just nod and smile and say, yeah, it totally does. I don't have a red, but I've got orange. So the very first step in making urine was we were going to have glomerular filtration. That thing right in the middle there is the glomerulus. So blood has to go in, it gets filtered, and it makes something called a filtrate. And so what actually goes into this proximal convoluted tubule is filtrate. So we're constantly filtering our blood, making filtrate. Now, we make about 180 liters of filtrate a day. So this is half a liter, so we make like 360 of these a day. Do we urinate that much? No, I hope not, or you'd never leave the bathroom. So the second step that has to happen, which we're going to get in today, is tubular reabsorption. 99-ish% of that 180 liters gets reabsorbed back. So we only make about 1.5 liters, like 3 of those worth of urine a day. The third step in making urine is tubular secretion. So tubular reabsorption, we are trying to reabsorb things out of the filtrate. Again, we have 180 liters going in here. We are trying to reabsorb lots of stuff. We don't want to lose it out of the body. We don't want it to go all the way through the nephron and get urinated out. And so we're going to absorb lots of things out. Secretion is the opposite, which we won't get through today. But the secretion is, there are sometimes things in our body that we would like to get rid of, and we can secrete them in. So we're going to start with tubular reabsorption. Is the fact that we've got 180 liters of filtrate, but we only want to make about 1.5 liters of urine. So we have to reabsorb a whole lot of stuff. Now, most, 99%, of tubular contents are all reabsorbed back into the blood. Now, how we absorb it, well, there's a couple parts. There's active transport, passive transport, as well as some hormonal influence that's going to cause us to absorb the majority of that filtrate out or back into the body. Just about all of your organic nutrients get absorbed. Usually these are things we want to keep. Amino acids, different types of sugars, we want to keep those. We should not see those in our urine because we should be absorbing them all back into the body. So, looking at reabsorption of nutrients, water, and ions. Now, a key phrase that if you know this, it'll also help you in advanced if you have to take advanced. Water follows solutes. Wherever solutes go, water goes with. It's a big key phrase that you have to know in advance too. Wherever solutes go, water is going to go with. So when we talk about absorbing different nutrients and ions, well, yes, water is going to follow as well. So it also includes reabsorbing of water. Now, sodium is the most abundant cation in filtrate. What's it mean to be a cation? It's positive charge, because cats are positive. I'm like, and yes, it's a positive charge. It's the most abundant cation in the filtrate. So we're going to do a lot of reabsorbing of that sodium. We have lots and lots of sodium in this filtrate. We would like to reabsorb a lot of it. Now, by reabsorbing sodium, other things will tag along as well. A lot of your sodium is transported by active transport, which means it needs ATP. It needs energy. We can use ATP and we can pump sodium out of here. reabsorb it back into our blood supply. Now, if we are pumping out, I'm going to use another color. If we are pumping out lots and lots of sodium, we have lots of positive leaving. It creates an electrical gradient. If we have lots of positive leaving, what's happening to the charge of the filtrate in here? It's becoming very negative. Does it like to stay negative? No. Things want to be nice and even if they can. And so by the sodium getting pumped out, it creates electrical gradient where all of a sudden you have this negative, and it doesn't like to be negative. And so anions, what are anions? Negatively charged things will also then start to leave. So by pumping sodium out, you now create an electrical gradient, and now negative things want to leave too, because they don't want to be, concentrated lots of negative things altogether. Pumping sodium is kind of our key thing. Also, organic nutrients such as sugar and amino acids. When sodium leaves, they tag along. It's like, oh, that sodium leaves. Oh, well, I'm going to tag along, and now I have a sugar molecule leaving or an amino acid that will follow and go right along with it. It's called co-transport. Same thing happens in our digestive system. As sodium gets absorbed, amino acids and sugars follow. Same type of thing happens in your kidneys as well. So glucose, amino acids, some ions, vitamins, they try to pair right up with sodium. It's like, well, while you're going, let me hitch a ride, and I'll get reabsorbed with you. Now, moving water out of here. Yes, water is going to want to follow. Good, I do have more colors. I have purple. Water is going to want to follow, mostly because of osmotic gradient. If solutes are moving, what follows solutes? Water does. Because if the solutes are leaving, then all of a sudden you have lots of water in there. Water doesn't want to be where there's lots of water. It wants to go where there's not as much water. Water will leave as well. Now, in the proximal convoluted tubule, that's PCT, we have proteins. There's my protein. Beautiful. They're usually purple anyways. It worked great. That's what I had left for color. There's usually these aquaporins. Now, based on the name, aquaporin, what's aqua mean? Water. What do you think of when you think of a porin or a pore? It's like a hole. It literally means like water hole. There are these little proteins here that just stay open, and water's like, oh look, there's a hole for me to go through. It's a hole designated for water to travel through. And water will leave. We have lots and lots of aquaporins in our proximal convoluted tubule. It'll start getting messy. Now, we can put more aquaporins. We can put more of these little transport proteins later on our nephron, but that's hormonal based, and we'll get to the hormone in a little bit. It's called an antidiuretic hormone. If there is an antidiuretic hormone around, we will put more of these aquaporins later on to try to reabsorb more water. That's called facultative water reabsorption. Kind of like fun. We'll move if there's extra holes. Now, the solutes. So, solute concentration of filtrate increases as water is reabsorbed. So, I kicked out sodium, anions went as well. Water starts to follow, will start to follow. As lots of water leaves, it will concentrate whatever is still left in there. And so we get this higher concentration of filtrate. So now we have a concentration gradient for more solutes. So I purposely kick out sodium, anions leave to offset. Water will follow sodium. Anytime water leaves, whatever's left gets concentrated. You've got lots of solutes. It might not be sodium, it might be other things, but we're concentrating whatever's in there because the water is leaving. And if we've got lots of, I was going to say like other types of sugars or potassium or other types of anions that are all hanging out in here, super concentrated because lots of water left, now we have a concentration gradient and they're going to want to leave. So, fat-soluble substance, other ions like potassium and urea are all going to try to leave because they don't like to be concentrated in there. It's like everyone's leaving the party. They don't want to be the last ones there. So other things will get reabsorbed as well. Fat-soluble substances, ions, urea, they all try to follow the water. They want to follow the party. Now, This becomes a problem because of lipid-soluble drugs. Not all drugs are lipid-soluble, but lipid-soluble drugs. And I'm like, they always want to follow, which means they're never going to end up in your urine. Lipid-soluble drugs stay in your body for a long time. Very environmental pollutants like mercury that you can find in fish, these stay in the body for a really long time. They're always following the water, which means they're always staying in our body. They never leave with the urine. So I'm like, it's good if it's certain things we want to keep, bad if it's things we would like to get rid of, and our body won't get rid of them. Now, the transport maximum. How much stuff, we're talking about how much stuff can we put out? That's your transport maximum. What is the maximum amount of stuff that we can pump out? There is a transport maximum for every substance. There is a transport maximum for how much sodium we can pump out. There's a maximum for how much potassium, how many amino acids, how much sugar, like how much urea. There is a maximum for every substance. It's all based on how many various channels there are. The more channels there are that things can leave, the more will get reabsorbed. The problem becomes if these channels or these carrier proteins are all full. If all the proteins that are in here that are pumping things across, if they are all full, can they pump any more across? No. And if they're like, we've got so much, you just gave us so much of something, we are all full, we can't reabsorb anything else that's there because we're all busy, some of those substances will eventually end up and leave in your urine. This happens for people that are hyperglycemic. What does that mean? Well, it kind of tells you. Lots of sugar. Shouldn't always put out thing. I'm like, it means you have lots of blood glucose levels. I'm like, you have lots and lots of sugar in your blood. Like an excessive amount of sugar in your blood because you can't regulate it. Who can't regulate sugar in their blood? Diabetics. So that means they have an excessive amount of sugar in their blood, which means there is an excessive amount of sugar that is in this filtrate. Because it was in the blood, it filtered, it's now in the filtrate. There are sugar carriers, there are glucose carriers that are trying to reabsorb all that glucose. However, you're going to get to the point you have too much glucose in your filtrate. All the carriers are full, they're all busy. And I'm like, and they're trying to pump as much as they can, but some of that sugar will eventually leave in your urine. You're going to have glucose in your urine. You should never have glucose in your urine. Now, indicators that people have diabetes. One is they have glucose in their urine. Their urine will actually smell sweet. It will actually smell sugary. The other thing, if glucose leaves, so we've got glucose leaving, what will follow? Water will follow as well. If glucose is leaving, not that it's coming from there, but if glucose is leaving, water's like, well, look, there's a party leaving. I better go with it. And diabetics are urinating a lot. It's one of the first symptoms for people that have diabetes. They are urinating often. They have sugar in their urine. It's because all the carriers, there's just too much sugar in their blood. The carriers were so busy. They were maximized out, and now you have sugar that left. Now, the proximal convoluted tubule, yes, this thing's all over because it's the site of most reabsorption. Hence the reason I did all this drawing everywhere. So all your nutrients, especially your glucose and amino acids, you know, lots of it, lots of glucose carriers being absorbed in here. We're trying to reabsorb everything out, keep it in our body. We like to keep glucose, we like to keep amino acids. What do amino acids make? Proteins. Again, we shouldn't have proteins in our urine, aka we should have amino acids in our urine. About 65% of the sodium, bunch of the water, lots of ions, almost all your uric acid, and some of your urea we talk about later that gets secreted back. And I'm like, lots of things getting reabsorbed in this first little proximal convoluted tubule. Now, the nephron loop, my loop. There's a descending limb and an ascending limb. Now, there's some differences between them. I'm like, in the descending limb, water can leave. We still have some of these little aquaporins, and water can leave. Oops, not the us. Oh yeah, that's still. Ignore my scribbly. So water likes to leave in the descending limb. Lots of aquaporins. When you get to the ascending limb, there are no more aquaporins. Now, when lots of water left, what does that do to the stuff that's left behind? It's going to be super concentrated in there, which it doesn't like. So it's going to start to leave when we start to get into that ascending loop. Now, there's a thin segment and a thick segment. Just the one's thinner than the other part. It just depends on what type of carrier proteins are in there. In the thin segment, I didn't draw it to scale. In the thin segment, the very first part, you have lots of sodium carriers, and you're going to have lots of sodium leaving. Sodium leaves. It's like the first thing that leaves. Wish I had more colors. In the thicker segment, you've got some more complicated protein carriers. I only have like 3 colors up here. More complicated thing that they like to package things and move them together as they ship things out, or they'll ship things in opposite. One of the things they like to ship out, they like to pair up sodium, potassium, and chloride. It's called the symporter. They're all together. And I'm like, and you're going to have your sodium and potassium and some chloride all leaving together. And then it's also going to have, they call it a sodium hydrogen ion or hydrogen antiporter, which means sodium will leave. We're still pumping out lots of sodium. And hydrogen ions go in. Now, hydrogen ions affect what? If you have lots of hydrogen ions, what does that do to your pH? It lowers it. I'm like, so if our blood starts to become too acidic and it has too many hydrogen ions, we can actually get rid of a few and they get pumped in right there to get urinated out. So I'm like, it helps a little bit with pH right there. Still getting messy. I'm going to have to erase some stuff in a little bit. Now, the distal collecting duct or the distal convoluted tubule and my collecting duct, what gets absorbed here is all hormonal based. There are 4 hormones. You're going to have these hormones. 4 basic hormones. The antidiuretic hormone, I briefly mentioned already. The aldosterone hormone, the atrial natriuretic peptide, and your parathyroid hormone. That thing that way back in the day when we did the skeletal system is absorbing calcium. So we're going to start with the first one. I'm going to erase this to make it look a little nicer, at least for my collecting duct here. Yes, you're going to have to know these. You need to know the 4 hormones. Now, the antidiuretic hormone, it has a nickname. I don't want to write anymore over there. It's known as the anti-P hormone. Now, anti-P, which means you're not going to want to urinate, which means you're going to want to absorb lots of water. You want to be able to reabsorb all the water and keep it in your body so you don't pee. Anti-P means no peeing, reabsorb more water so it doesn't end up in your urine. Now, it's released by the pituitary gland, that little thing that had, hung down from the hypothalamus way back in the day when we did the nervous system, releases the antidiuretic hormone. And it acts on both the distal convoluted tubule and the collecting duct. And what it does is it inserts aquaporins, water holes. And so I'm not going to draw it in the distal. Pretend it's there. So it starts to insert aquaporins in the collecting duct, which means water will leave. So it increases your water reabsorption. You're reabsorbing water out, which means you have less water in your urine. You're not going to urinate as much if you don't have as much water in there. You're not making as much urine. The more antidiuretic hormone released, the more water gets reabsorbed. You make less urine. Now, interesting point on that. What do you think alcohol has? How do you think alcohol affects your antidiuretic hormone? It has an effect on it. Alcohol inhibits your antidiuretic hormone. So if you drink alcohol, it inhibits this, which means it inhibits your anti-P hormone, the anti-P hormone, which means you're going to do what? You're going to pee. You're not going to reabsorb any of this water out, and you're going to urinate more. Now, alcohol comes in what form? Liquids. You know, then you have ice and stuff mixed in there too. Now you're drinking lots of liquids, and you're reabsorbing even less water. You urinate all the time. Now, then I always hear what about the breaking the seal thing? Oh, I broke the seal, now I have to urinate all the time. No, you just drank enough alcohol that's when that antidiuretic hormone kicked in. It just means there was at some point the antidiuretic hormone was inhibited, and you drank enough that you have to urinate. Because you inhibited the hormone, that doesn't stop, it's still inhibited, and you're still drinking. And so, no, there's no you broke the seal. It just means you drank enough. Now, the next hormone, I'm going to erase one. So this was the antidiuretic is just reabsorbing water. Back to my little collecting duct. Aldosterone, this works in the collecting duct and in the distal convoluted tubule. I'm just going to draw it in the collecting duct. And it inserts more carriers. I'm just going to use green because I don't want to use purple. Now, it is going to insert sodium channels. And it's going to insert, I should use another color though, potassium channels. So it's going to insert sodium channels, potassium channels. Sodium will get reabsorbed. Yay for it. Now, if sodium gets reabsorbed, what will follow? Water will always follow. But the potassium channel, it will actually cause potassium to go in. If sodium is leaving, which is a positive ion, potassium will offset it. I shouldn't have used purple. Blue. Doesn't matter. Potassium will go in. If you have potassium in your blood and we need to get rid of it a little bit because there's a little bit too much, we can use, our body will use the aldosterone hormone because this will actually create the secretion of potassium ions. So we can reabsorb sodium and water, and we can get rid of potassium. Now, by doing this, by reabsorbing water, because we're reabsorbing water, water will go into the blood. It will increase your blood volume. Anytime you increase blood volume, your blood pressure goes up, and it will decrease potassium levels. So your body is using your urinary system is constantly trying to monitor your blood pressure by monitoring blood volume. More blood volume, because you just got done drinking a big 2-liter bottle of water, the more blood volume, more blood pressure. The next hormone, the atrial natriuretic peptide. It's the exact reverse of aldosterone. You can just notice that. It's the reverse of aldosterone. Instead of sodium getting reabsorbed, now it goes in. Water will follow. Instead of potassium going in, potassium will get reabsorbed. Aldosterone causes blood volume to go up and blood pressure to go up. But if your blood pressure is too high, let's reverse that. And now we can reduce blood volume and reduce blood pressure. And the last hormone is your parathyroid hormone. Way back when we talked about the parathyroid hormone, it increases calcium reabsorption. Again, if you don't have enough calcium in your diet, we want to reabsorb as much calcium as we possibly can and keep that calcium in our blood as much as we can. So the parathyroid hormone, it acts on the distal convoluted tubule, a little bit with your collecting duct. I'll draw it up because that's mostly in your distal. It's just going to increase calcium absorption. Now, calcium does leave. What follows? Water will follow as well. Water will still follow. But it's just trying to get calcium to maintain and stay in your blood. That's the last, because I think we start with tubular secretion next time. So we're just trying to reabsorb as much out of that filtrate so we don't have to urinate 360 of those a day.